Hey guys, today we have on the show Tim Peters. Always a pleasure to have. I know I talk about this. Obviously, I love having women on the show as well, but also I think having guys in the space who are going through it as well as much needed. I think a lot of guys suffer in silence, and not only is Tim going through and has been through his own chronic illness journey, he's now helping others. He's got an amazing story, got awesome insights. Super excited to get into this episode. So let's go. Welcome to another episode of the Chronic Comeback Podcast. Today, I'm really happy and excited to have on the show Tim Peters. How you doing, Tim?
Doing great. Thanks. Thanks for having me.
Well, good. We were just swapping war stories about having grown up in incredibly cold locations. I actually feel like the winters might even be more brutal in Boston than they are in the UK. It gets really cold, right?
It does, yeah. And you think you're good. It's always around end of February. Everyone's like, we're good. This is going to be an easy winter. We haven't had a lot of snow. March 10th, we're like, yeah, we're good. We're through it. And then boom, you get that day with a foot of snow. Week later, not for right. So people have short memories there, which makes sense because you don't want to remember those winters. But because it goes on. It goes on like into mid-April. So
Yeah,
they're
that is brutal. I actually, yeah, I mean, it's not that brutal, but it's more that I always remember because my birthday's in February, and I would always go, yeah, we're getting there. Like, there's some nice days coming, and then it's like raining and freezing cold in like the beginning of May, and I'm like, what is going on?
exactly, yeah.
So yeah, would really we talked a little bit before recording about kind of having it's really cool for me and any like men listening and also women, but like men listening to have like another man on the show and talk about chronic illness. I've had a lot of women on the show, very courageous, inspirational women. But I feel like women deal with this kind of stuff in a different way. And if I'm honest, probably a better way in a lot of time, in a lot of things, because they're able to talk about it. A lot of it is tapping into like feelings and tapping into the way your body feels. And for men, me in particular, like, I have a lot of trouble doing that. So it's really cool having another man on the show. We've actually got a couple of other guys lined up. And so, yeah, really excited to talk about that side of things. I'll stop talking now. If we could go back before you ever had any sort of chronic illness or chronic symptoms, what was life like for you growing up from a health point of view? Were you a healthy person? Did you all kind of have stuff going on? Could you talk us a little bit about that?
Yeah. Truthfully, it's still, I feel like it's going to be another 10 years until I'm able to really say, okay, I got it.
Yeah.
I would say to the Thanksgiving 2020, so about 3 years ago, I pulled out my medical records. I had my parents gather them from when I was born, and it was just eye-opening. There were so many things in there that just didn't add up and that were overlooked, maybe not followed up on. And it was eye-opening. It really was. And so, but it's still tough for me to say. So did this cause anything that's going on today? I mean, it would be hard to say it didn't,
Yeah.
but it's really hard to understand what were the biggest issues. But I had so many sinus infections as a kid, lactose intolerant at 6 months, but kept drinking milk anyways. A lot of things like that, right? Allergies young, some sort of strange growth issues. Even though I'm 6'4", just some weird things that didn't add up. 14, I fractured my spine, non-contact injury. Yeah, so the list goes on. There were just all these things. And I would say, so the way I see it is, a lot of people would say, you must have had a really weak immune system. I think I had a really strong immune system. I think that there were so many things that came into my life. And I traveled to Europe, I got salmonella and just all these different little things. My body kept fighting them off. And it was because my immune system was so good that it wasn't until I was 26 that I completely collapsed.
Okay. Just as interesting, you said you had a growth problem. I would kill to have a growth problem that gives me a 6'4" height.
Of course. Yeah.
I'm joking. So Really, really interesting. You said the age 26. I can, having done over, well, I don't know now, over 120, maybe 130 podcasts. There's a lot of, for me, it like really went south at like 28. I recently had someone on the show 27, 26. It's like that. There's that tipping point, and I totally agree with you. For me, I had a lot of telltale signs, but then I also really wasn't treating myself very well in addition to that. So
Yeah.
26, 20s are an interesting time because you're really trying to figure
Yeah.
yourself out, and you're trying to make your way in the world. What led up to the point where things kind of collapsed? What was life like in your kind of 20s?
Yeah. So graduated college, had a job for a year. Things were good. Then started my own business and things were great. I mean, and felt physically like I was in tip top shape at that point in my life. I was working 60, 70 hours a week by choice. And I loved what I was doing. In a, healthy relationship, had a great social life, working out 5, 6 days a week, a lot of personal development going on. Things were good. And then a year before the real collapse, I had a sinus surgery, which I was kind of talked into. And interestingly, I look back and I say that's sort of the tipping point because it didn't go great. And after that, I kept having these weird things happen with my health where like every 6 weeks, I just couldn't get out of bed for a couple of days. But then I'd be like, a couple of days later, I'd be fine and I'd get right back to it. But it kept happening. And then it would happen a little bit more frequently, a little bit more frequently. But yeah, the years leading up for 3, 4 years, I was, on top of the world. I felt amazing physically, mentally, emotionally. And then right after that sinus surgery as well, there was suddenly a lot of stress in my life, family, personally. So there were just kind of this culmination of different things that started to happen.
Like a perfect storm kind of thing.
Yeah.
Perfect not being the word, but a terrible storm. Yeah. So what actually happened then at that time when, because it's so interesting. I haven't actually, this is the second episode back since I haven't been recording in a while. And I always remember, it's always like, I'm like nodding like, oh my God, that is so similar in the, I would have, it just, stuff got more and more frequent. And I was used to it going away eventually. And then one day it just didn't. So what happened in that period for you? What were your symptoms? And, what could you talk us through that part of it?
Yeah. And interestingly, like as I look back and you say, I think females tend to deal with this stuff better. And I think part of that is, especially for men, I think all people, but especially men, we're taught to dismiss our intuition. I think if that weren't the case, I would have listened when I had those days when I couldn't get out of bed, right? Because that's clearly there's something wrong, right?
Yeah.
But my intuition was like, there's something deeper going on here, and I knew there was. But I'm like, what do we do? Men, we push through anything, rain, sunshine, storm, push through. So that was clearly going on. And then 26. So this was July 2016. My girlfriend at the time got like a summer flu, and I thought I just picked that up from her. And I was just really sick for a few days. Back in my mind though, truthfully, like something else is going on. I was coming back from a work trip from New York, and I was driving home, and I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to make it home. It was like that sudden, that stick. Got back, had the weekend, didn't leave my apartment. Monday came, let it go. One of the most interesting things that happens, I would work out a lot of times in the morning before work. A few days a week, I would go into the sauna. And what really started to make me think that something was off is maybe that like Tuesday, maybe 4 or 5 days. And I said, okay, I got to like start to sweat this out or something. This is weird that this hasn't passed. Because for me, 3 or 4 days, it's gone. So I went in the sauna, and then a couple hours later at work, I'm just, getting a cup of coffee, and I, for 3, 4, 5 seconds, blacked out. And I kind of stumbled and fell back into a table. And that had never happened to me before in my life. And so I kind of later in the day, I'm like, I think that was the sauna, because I had this like feeling of like a hot flash kind of thing that happened throughout my body. So being me, what did I do? 2 days later, I'm like, let's go back in the sauna and field test that. Kind of stupid, but also you got to know, right? So I did, sure enough, same thing happened. 2 hours later, this time I was like holding on to things. So I was fine, but same thing happened. So to kind of cut forward a little bit, after that, I had a lot going on. I had some weddings to travel to. I had a work trip down in Florida from, going from Boston to Florida, went to New Jersey for a wedding. Then I had to go directly to Utah for a work conference. It was in Park City, 8,000 feet elevation. By the time I got there, I was done. Like any chance I had of recovering at that point, my body was shot. And so again, just completely ignoring the fact that I should have canceled all of that and just rested. Completely spent. Saw a couple doctors while I was out there, nothing, dehydration, elevation sickness, whatever. Came back, saw my primary care. I had seen her before I went to, but same kind of thing, just rest, nothing's wrong, nothing's wrong. Interestingly, now knowing what it was, my thyroid was so swollen that I couldn't button the top button on my shirt, which is like very swollen. But at the time, I didn't even know this was where your thyroid is. But later, when, I saw an endocrinologist and told him that, he said, oh, so your thyroid was like out of sorts. But that was one of the first really marketed. So, I had that going on. I had sort of these blackouts, dizziness, insomnia, headaches. Emotionally, I was totally out of control with my emotions, which don't really talk about often because that's kind of tough to say. But, some days I would wake up and cry and I wasn't even sure why. I would be really down, then I would feel normal. And talk about not knowing what's going on in your body. When you have those emotional swings, that was really tough for me. And that's when I started really kind of freaking out because, you're like, okay, I can't control the fact I can't sleep. I'm sweating, then I'm getting cold. I'm crying, then I feel fine, for no reason. And so from there, it really progressed like a lot of people, where over the course of the next 11 months, I saw 24 or 25 doctors, every specialist you can imagine, right? Infectious disease, ENTs, endocrinologists, gastroenterologists, cardiologists, anyone. A lot of great doctors in Boston. But they did not know what they were doing with this stuff because, traditional medicine doesn't understand these things. And so, I had heart monitors going on. I had equipment for sleep apnea. I had all these different things, and seemingly they were ruling a lot out, but they were still not looking for the right things. And so it was not until I would say May, I think it was May, I was talking to a client on the phone in New York. She was in an incredible mood, just one of those conversations I'll never forget. And she said, I've been sick for 11 years and I finally got a diagnosis. And she started to use some words that only I had ever said. I'd heard no one else say it. Talked about having these crashes, going through these cycles, some other very particular words. And I asked her, I said, want to ask your permission. Is it okay if we kind of forget about our call and talk about your health? Because I've been having some health challenges. And of course she was like, yeah. So it turned out that she had just gotten diagnosed with chronic Lyme disease. And I told her what was going on with me. And she said, you have to go find someone to talk to about this. She told me some websites to go to look for it. I found an osteopath in the area and he saw me. I was very skeptical. And he said, this is either Lyme or a thyroid issue. And if it's a thyroid issue, it's likely caused by the Lyme. I ran from him because knowing everything I knew, I'm like, this doesn't make sense. How would these 24, 25 doctors miss this? That doesn't make sense. And so I went and saw another chronic illness specialist. We ran every lab you can imagine, probably cost me $12,000. And we found a lot of stuff, right? But the cause was still kind of buried, right? There was some mold, there was some of this, some of that. And he came to the same conclusion. Some of it was directly from the labs, and said, okay. At that point, I was like, now this makes sense, because I also in that meantime had the ability to talk to a lot of people, and they all said, what else could this be?
Mm.
So it was August of 2017.
And so did you, because I got a clinical diagnosis of Lyme disease, but I never actually had, because where I got like bitten, it was like out in Australia, and they don't, and so I didn't actually ever get like a positive test for Lyme. Did you actually get like a positive test, or was it through your symptoms, or how did that happen?
Oh no, I'm sorry. So I had a few of the co-infections positive. The Lyme was not positive. It
Yeah.
actually wasn't until like almost a year ago that I got a positive blood test.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it took that, but it's funny because, and I say this like maybe as encouragement to some people who are listening, you know what's going on. And if
Mm.
you believe that going on, it took me this long, and it took all the people, some people, friends, family, whoever, who are like, that's not it. You're crazy, blah, blah, much worse things than that. Right. But finally, after all these years, and truthfully, I needed to see that, which is sad. But just because there were so many people that, said a clinical diagnosis doesn't mean anything, even though you and I know that that's not true. It means
Yeah.
just as much. But having seen that after 6 years, I was like, sometimes it just takes that many times to test.
Yeah. Yeah. And so when someone gets a diagnosis, because I've had many different, it's like, I remember someone saying it, I can't remember who it was. It's like trying to identify what's public enemy number one, which is who's the guy that's really pulling the strings behind, behind the curtain. Is it, is it the mold? Is it the Lyme? And so I kind of went from like, a bit of whack-a-mole really, with like different things. It was Lyme initially, and then it was like heavy metals, then it was parasites, and it was mold. And so it was really trying to identify which, and each time I kind of went on a different treatment protocol, and it never really moved the needle as that much, unfortunately, through doing that. Did you just go on a lot of, once you got your diagnosis, then you go down the route of, okay, I'm going to try every single different protocol that I get given? Was it like that, or were you just in on one protocol and that start to make a difference? Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So at that time, I was very much still on this. I still have my blinders. I don't really know how else to put it, that like I was going to do this and then everything was going to go back to normal. And when you go through something life changing, your life changes.
Mm.
And I know it's kind of stupid, but we forget that. And the people around us forget that. You can't go through something like this, even if it's just for a year, and it not change you. So I just thought, oh, I'll do this. I'll do their treatment. I'll be better in like 3 months. No. But here's the thing. I didn't have anything really explained to me. I didn't have a support system. It was just me still trying to work as much as possible on my own caretaker and then doing this treatment. I have no idea what I'm doing. And so I was just listening to this doctor, right? Because he's the first person who made me feel that I'm not invisible. Yeah. And so what do? We start on antibiotics. How many do we take? However many he says. And so looking back, that didn't make sense. Not that I'm saying definitely don't take antibiotics, right? Because maybe they did help me, and some people, they do help, and that's great. I mean, I know people who took antibiotics for a year and got better. That's great. The problem was there was no talk about detoxing. There was no talk about drainage. There was no talk about binders. I had no idea what a binder was for at least a year after that. Okay. So that was the issue. It was out of order. So you're talking about whack-a-mole. I didn't even know that was a game until 10 months later. I just thought, we're going to do this. We're going to kill it and it'll be gone. Oh, so yeah. So as you imagine, I started taking these antibiotics and it was bad. I got really bad. Some things did start to show up more as we did that though, which was good. We discovered babesia. We did find some heavy metals, right? So it was good, but essentially the plan became kill more, kill more, kill more. From there we brought in another doctor. We slowly, added an herbalist, right? And so, but it was just more of the same. And for me, that was really the difficulty. Eventually, it would have been probably 8 months into treatment. I had to just walk away from my business. I went out on full disability because it was clear to me that I can't keep myself and my business afloat. And the biggest part of that was it occurred to me, I have no idea what's going on still. I had no idea what's going on in my body. I only have the time to show up to these appointments, do what these doctors tell me, and then get as much rest as possible. And I knew that I would never get better if that was the case. I'm like, I need to open up the books. I need to understand this stuff. I need to play a role actively in my healing. And that's what I started doing. And unfortunately, all that time actually of that treatment really moved me backwards, right? Because, I look at with stuff like drainage, right? If it's not open, you have a 4-lane highway going into one. And if you kill more stuff, it's the 8-lane highway going into one. And that's what I became. So from there though, I did start to understand. I'm like, okay, got to take binders, got to start doing mold. And really, I did start playing, like you called it, that whack-a-mole game from then. And so really, when I moved out here to Arizona in about 2 years ago, November 2021.
Yeah, could you so much I want to actually what I want to really ask you, which is I think it's a good topic to talk about, and then we'll jump back into kind of the Arizona thing, is so at that point, just before you moved to Arizona and you're going through this, are you like 28 by then, or like how old are you?
Let's see. So I'm 33 now.
Yeah.
So I moved here. I was 31 when I moved here.
Okay. So the reason I say that is just because I was like 28, and then it was kind of like 30, 31, and everyone's going through this like in phase where they're really just moving forward with their lives. Everyone, every year, someone's, getting married or having kids and all of this kind of stuff. And then they're just walking through, they're drinking loads of alcohol, they're doing whatever they like. And I was just like, oh my God, my life's on hold. I could do that maybe when I'm better. And it was such like a really difficult thing to deal with for a long time, because I just felt so on the edge, on the outside looking in. That's what it felt like. Even when I was with people, it just felt like kind of there was this screen there and I was looking at them living this other life and I was there. What was it like for you in terms of like the relationships in your life and kind of how, I guess I'm assuming, disconnected you might have felt? And could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Yeah, it was tough. It was really tough. I mean, I've been such a social person at that point in my life. I used to drink quite a bit. I used to like to have a lot of fun, work hard, play hard. I was in a fraternity in college. I had a lot of friends in the Northeast. But things changed quickly for me. While I was sick, a few months before starting treatment, I moved in with my girlfriend at the time. We were in a very serious relationship. And a few months after starting treatment, she left. She was gone, like at the drop of a hat. And so that was big. I had no real, at moments, like a little bit of help here and there, but no real support from family, which has been very tough. And I think the toughest part of that is because I was living so close to family, people assumed that it was happening. And so, sometimes people assume, right? So I think sometimes people assume you're getting support from other people. So they kind of say, I don't need to bother, right? So that actually made my life more difficult. And the other part that was difficult for me is, you have to learn to ask for help, and people remind me of that. And I say, I have, and I did. And, I would remind people, I would even bother them like, hey, can you come by and have lunch with me? Can you pick up lunch and come by? It would be great to see you. I haven't seen anyone for 3 weeks. I would do that. But after a while, after I, remind them 3, 4 times, like, I'm really sick, I could use like a buddy. Like, I can't keep bothering people. It became really difficult, especially to go from a place where it felt like when I was healthy and able to go out and have fun, everyone wanted to be around me. And now that I'm this other person, no one even wants to check in on me. That still hurts sometimes. I've worked through that a lot, but that's heavy to feel like you kind of don't matter to these people ultimately. That's a lot to, and that's not true, right? That's not really the case, but that is how it feels for a while.
Yeah, for sure. What's in a lot of areas of my life, what I've like gained a lot through doing like personal development, plant medicine stuff I've done like recently is like trying to, for me, and this is me personally, to take a lot of like ownership over my role in all of that. Because I used to be like, particularly like stuff from my family. What you just said then really resonates with me. Like, I love them and they care about what I'm going through, but there's no real understanding. Like I still get some shit off them because I don't drink with them and stuff like that. And if they really got it, they wouldn't give me shit for not drinking alcohol. Just crazy and just like, yeah, just not that support that I need. But I also, I don't voice, I don't really, it sounds like you did, but I personally didn't really voice mainly. And then when people did try to help me, I'd be like, oh, you don't get it. You know, this isn't helpful. So I kind of pushed them away. And so for me, like I'm trying to, yeah, now taking a bit of a step back, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I guess they don't get it because they're not going through it. And so it's really difficult for them to understand. I think, you know, you mentioned about your ex-girlfriend. That must be so brutal at the time. But if anything, it's a good that it happened because you got to see, you know, where, I guess, what she and maybe other people in your life, it really, what chronic illness, I don't know about you, but for me, it like really highlights who's your real friends and then who's not, right?
Totally. It does. I mean, it also, to me, it gave me a kick in the ass because, and not that like I wasn't trying to be the best version of myself, but I started therapy just after that. And it was around the difficulty of that relationship and how I was now going to have like really no emotional support, what it felt like, and how I was going to learn how to get closure and how to support myself emotionally and all that. And I'm thrilled that that happened because yes, you know, that wasn't going to be, she wasn't who I thought she was, great, but like she had her reasons for leaving. Like I don't have ill feelings towards her, right? It was a difficult situation and it wasn't for her. It, you know, and I think that we tend to harp on people for this stuff. It's really hard. It's really hard, right? It is hard to see someone you love like become this shriveled version of themselves. And you know, I get it. And so some people can't be around that. I think what I would say is wrong is it's better to say something than not say something. And that people need to learn how to voice that and say, it's really hard for me to be around you when I see you like this. Are there other ways I can support you?
Yeah.
You know, just, you got to learn to deal with that discomfort. The other thing I want to mention though is, about a year and a half ago, I was out here in Arizona. I wasn't in Scottsdale. I was in Tucson, and things were kind of dark, both emotionally and in some other ways. And I really needed help. And I reached out to a group of my college friends and I just sent them an email and I just told them, I just said, hey, I am not doing well. I am super lonely out here. And they showed up. One of my good friends who, I've known for like 20 years now, flew out here like 2 weeks later. Some other friends came out here a few months later. They set up a GoFundMe for me to help me raise money to pay for my treatment. I mean, yeah, so it's been really hard, but like you said, you get to see who some of these people are. I mean, after I sent that email, like over the next few days, I got like 15 phone calls. I mean, so yes, sometimes you reach out to people and it goes unanswered or you have to constantly remind them, but sometimes you do, you know, I think to me, what I've learned is the relationships are about quality, not quantity. And before I was, hey, I had 60 friends, but I couldn't remember the name of their girlfriends, right? So what kind of relationship is that? And now I have only a handful of really good relationships, but they matter. They matter a lot. And they're people where if something's wrong, I would hop on a flight for them, and I know they would do the same for me. And that's way more important to me.
Yeah. What a great example there of like asking for help. I've that you've inspired me. It's something I've like really been trying to work on. And yeah, I guess it's a way of like seeing who's going to show up for you, and amazing that you had those guys who did. Could you talk a little bit about the move to Arizona? Again, resonates with me, you know, wanting to, they do talk a lot in brain retraining about, what is it? Like pan disrupt, and moving location is a big thing to do in that respect. You know, you're used to experiencing the Boston, I imagine, getting dark really bloody early and sun rising really bloody late in the winter. And that's tough to deal with when you're already going through what you're going through. Was it the weather that drove it? We just need, like, what went behind your decision to do that?
So there was a part of me that always wanted to live somewhere else. That is, I went to college in Virginia, couldn't find a job down there. I ended up back in Boston, and I thought, shoot, I'm never going to leave here again. So, you know, especially coming out of COVID, that maybe I had an opportunity to go somewhere else. I jumped on it, really. The challenge was coming here sick by myself, not really knowing anyone. And that's still a little bit challenging, but really I looked at this as I have an opportunity. Really, I'm like, okay, I'm 31. I'm looking at the rest of my life, and I've done all these difficult things. Okay. I've done all these treatments. You know, I've done hyperthermia in Mexico. I've started a business I've done all these things on my own. I can start over there. What I'm much more scared about is feeling like this for the rest of my life. Mm-hmm. So that's what really said, I can figure this out. But the biggest thing, yes, was the weather. And it really was that, it was impacting my mental health, but my physical health. I'm very, susceptible to barometric pressure swings. When it rains or there's high humidity, I tend to get migraines, but my body in general, when we go from it being low humidity to high or vice versa, I feel lousy. I feel awful. And it's crazy because here, when that happens now, because it doesn't happen that often, but I know, I can tell, you know, at night, 2 nights ago, I was getting a migraine, and I'm like, I think it's humid. It was 60%. I can tell. So a couple months before I came out here, in that month of 31 days, it rained 29 days. And I just had migraines going on the entire month. I talked to my doctor, and she said, I really think that a lot of this is environmental. It's all the moisture, rain, humidity, barometric pressure swings. And she said, if you want to try a dry climate, I'm like, yes, let's do that. And so I jumped on it, and that was that.
Awesome. And how quickly did you notice a difference, and how quickly, and could you take us through your time there, and, you know, changes you've made, progression you've made, and kind of like where you're at right now?
Yeah. So it took some time. So when I first got here, I think partially because, you know, I do have allergies, a lot of plants out here, living at elevation. I was also living in some mold. And so I think, you know, they call it unmasking, going from in mold to out of it, that your body can actually go through this sort of purging process, if you're familiar with that at all. And so it can be a lot. And so for the first 6 weeks or so, I felt horrible. But then after that, I kind of like had this switch go off, and pretty quickly I'm like, okay. So it took a little bit of time, but I also had to hop around quite a bit. I started off in Sedona, just because from an environmental standpoint, elevation, what have you, it really seemed perfect. We've had this housing stuff going on here, especially with a lot of people from California coming here. And so I couldn't find a place to rent there. So then I ended up in Tucson. was not for me. Was not there that long, and then I ended up here, and I was able to kind of settle here. But by the time I was heading to Tucson, it was really clear that I was feeling significantly, like a significant difference with the weather. And it started when there would be days that would rain. I would notice how much my migraines were worse. And then I was noticing on the other days, I'm like, I have a little bit more energy. I'm a little bit more mentally clear. And it would build and it would build. And I think that it's really allowed me also, and you might be able to relate to this, but when you get rid of one symptom or one infection, it helps you see what else is going on. So for me, when I was back in Boston, I was able to kind of address some of my big symptoms. And then I started to notice that in certain environments, I would feel a certain way. And my doctor said, I think we got to test for mold. And sure enough, that was an issue. And so addressing sort of one thing at a time, being here, that's allowed me to kind of see some of the other things that are going on. And so since being here, the biggest thing that I've really been focusing on is mold, and then parasites have been my really biggest thing. It turns out that it plagued me the most. So that's been my biggest focus. And beyond that, just trying to build up a lot of foundations with taking care of my body, exercising, brain rewiring, lots of nervous system work, things like that.
Cool, man. And so compared to where you were at, and it is difficult to do this because you kind of, I don't know about you, but when I'm thinking, oh, how am I compared to that point in my life, and how am I, compared to last year, and I think even doing that, is that a healthy thing to do? And then even analyzing if that's a healthy thing to do, is that a healthy thing to do? But in terms of how you were doing when you were in Boston, it seems like there's a significant difference. Would you say, like where you're at?
Definitely. Absolutely. No, I was not working at all for years, out on full, living off of disability. And earlier this year, I launched my new business. I'm not working full time, but I'm building that up, and I'm able to do more. I'm exercising more. My mind is clearer. I'm a different person than I was before I came here. 100%. I mean, I would say I'm a different person than I was a year ago.
Amazing. Yeah, but I've got a couple more questions, but yeah, thanks for coming on and sharing your story when you're not. I have a few people that I speak to, and it's actually, when I thought about creating this podcast, I was like, I'm going to create this podcast when I'm better, when I'm like fully 100%. And then someone just said, no, you need to do it now. It's going to be more. And I was like, oh no, I don't want to put myself out there because, it's going to really shine a light on it for me. Like I'm not there. And the person who told me to do it was so right. Like I gained so much from being in this whilst, and I've made progression whilst doing this podcast. And so, yeah, thank you for coming on. Like when, maybe things aren't perfect, but, you've still got a way to go. And I think, there's a lot of courage in doing that. So I really just wanted to say, I really appreciate you doing that.
Yeah, no, of course. I appreciate it. And I'm with you. I mean, I think I was terrified at first to start working again, knowing that what if my health declined? And, I think that you gain a lot of confidence, and there's even healing in doing that, right? I mean, you may or may not be, I don't want to speak for you, but was doing this, did that kind of help you?
I mean, for me, so I'm still not where I would like to be. However, since doing this podcast, and it can't be just down to the podcast, it's down to the many things that I've looked at and whatnot, I'm actually enjoying my life again. Like I find one of the biggest movers for me was have you heard of Dr. Kat King? Oh my God, why can't I remember her name? Oh my God, what's the name of the course? This is ridiculous. God, if she's listening to this now, she'll be annoyed. Can't remember what it is. It's been a while. Anyway, her whole thing was just really trying to take the perfectionism out of like the recovery, and like I was like, I would take a course, or I would, have a look at a pro course. I was like, oh, I'm not doing that absolutely perfectly. If I don't avoid every single bit of gluten, if I don't sleep this perfectly, I'm not going to recover. And I realized that actually that anxiety around that was the worst thing in itself. And by allowing a little bit of bread, or, you know what I mean? If I did have a terrible night's sleep, it wasn't the end of the world. If I did all of these things and I allowed myself to enjoy life a little bit more and be a little bit easier on myself, I actually saw like progression in that, and having that mindset. Now that's a difficult thing as well, because the way I am, like, I then go, okay, well, maybe I can push it a little bit too much. Maybe I can start doing 7-day work weeks, and then I'll start to feel it. But that was a big thing for me, and it's got me to a certain point. Now it's about, okay, yeah, it's about getting to another level, which I'm trying to figure out. I don't know if any of that kind of resonates with you at all.
No, completely. No, completely. And I think, you kind of push the limit sometimes, and like, there's still a limit there. But yeah, I think, so take a diet, right? So I think during certain periods, and I don't want to talk like I'm not a nutritionist, but just from a little guy's opinion, when you have a super restricted diet, that's really beneficial during certain periods of time, during particular situations. But if you're doing that for years and years during this, that's treating your mind to be like super rigid and like, oh, I can't have a cashew in there, or else, as opposed to like, this is what I do. And I try to be good 85 or 90% of the time, and the rest isn't going to really matter. And, just kind of being like, I'm really good when I eat at home. So when I go out, if a little bit of this happens, a little bit of that, it's fine. Right. You got to just like breathe a little air into it, because otherwise, yeah, it just creates this mind where like you're not breathing.
I couldn't have said it better. Yeah, like the 80-20-90-10 rule is kind of exactly what I tried to do. I had this, you talk about going and doing all kinds of treatments. I've done some crazy shit. One of them was like a 21-day water fast in it was in Arizona, actually. No, it wasn't even California. Done so much crazy shit. And anyway, as part of that, they say you need to avoid all salt, oil, and something or other. So when I came back, I had to prepare all of that. I couldn't eat out of restaurants, and it was my girlfriend's birthday, and I went to a restaurant with her and all her family, and I just sat there not eating, and they're all eating, drinking alcohol, and I'm sitting there not eating and just drinking a glass of water. And like, I know, like my brother-in-law, his like girlfriend, just sitting there, and she's like, we didn't know each other that well at the time, and I could think she's just thinking, what a weirdo. And like, yeah, that is not good for like your mental side of things. And she didn't get it. She just thought of trying to be healthy, and that is just not good. And just like, as I say, like eating kind of what you want within reason. Yeah, don't go and have like a load of ice cream and all that kind of thing. But like, it helps you feel connected with other people, and like actually eating with other people. It is a way of connecting, right?
Yeah, completely.
Yeah, yeah. Brain rewiring. So I've had a lot of people on the show that have healed from brain retraining, and some of them have come on, and it's like they've got these crazy stories where 1 week they are bedbound, the next they're completely healed, and it's like super inspiring. But for someone like me who's tried like brain rewiring, it's like, oh shit, like it kind of shines a light on the fact that it hasn't worked like that for me. But the theory behind it for me makes just so much sense. Like that my nervous system is in this fight or flight, and I have I've had some really bad like mental brain habits that keep me in this state. I know, and I still have some of them today. And so brain rewiring really, to me, it does make a lot of sense. What's been your experience with it? Are you still doing a version of it? Like, could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So my introduction to it was DNRS,
Yes.
Dynamic Neural Retraining System,
Yeah.
back in 2019. And It did help me. I was having pretty bad PTSD at the time, and we won't get into that. There were some very like specific things, both from earlier in my life and that resurfaced at that time. It helped get me out of that. It helped get me out of that very sort of difficult, almost like kind of shaky phase. But I think part of it, interestingly, you kind of made me realize right now, I was in such a perfectionist mindset still that I couldn't get as much out of it as I could have because I'm like, I have to do this rigidly. To be fair, I do think DNRS does tend to kind of tell you that you got to be rigid with it, which to me, after 6 weeks, I was like, this is now, if anything, making me go a little bit backwards. So I just put it down, which my doctor said, yeah, get rid of it. And so I would say maybe 3 months ago, I have a friend who helps people with it and does it in a much more free flowing way. And I really like it. It's much just more graceful. Like I was saying, just kind of breathe some air into it. And I'll be honest, both I haven't had those moments of like, you know, floating on air, right? I'm not like flying now. I'm not, oh, everything's perfect. For me, what this does right now is it gets my mind out of either an agitated state or I'm overthinking, or if I haven't slept well a few nights in a row and it, getting close to bedtime and I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to sleep well again. I'm like, do a couple rounds and get it out, get that out of your system. And so it kind of is good to just reset me and calm my nervous system back down. It's probably doing more for me than I realize, but I'm not noticed. Like, I think it's causing me to, maybe go just slowly up, but it's not causing this like massive surge for me.
Yeah, and I think it's good for people to hear that as well, because like it's what I'm doing at the moment. I have this daily practice that I'm doing at the moment, and it's about getting that, being consistent, and just having that kind of extra 0.5% every day, extra 0.5%.
Yeah.
Feel like it's doing something, but over time that compounds a hell of a lot. Sorry, Dr. Kat King, Primal Trust, the program is.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
she talks a lot about not being a perfectionist. And one of the main things she said in that course that really just resonated, and I've said it a lot on this podcast, just how to are you finding any joy in your day? And when she said that, I was like, wow, this is when I was in London. I was like, I think I've had any joy in my day for quite a long time. Why? And then that was when I was like, shit, I get joy from exercise, like, and I can't exercise right now. And she said also, like, you need to build an identity of you're someone who exercises. And even if that is that, just do this every day until you can do this every day. And then until you can stand up every day. And it's like, no, I'm doing my exercise now because I exercise. I'm a person who exercises. And for me at that point, I had so many issues that I couldn't do anything, but I worked with this guy out in Bali, and it was about just building me up so slowly. And it was really small at the beginning, and it felt like I was going backwards and forward. And then weirdly, just after about 9 months of doing it, it just all started to speed up at once. And now I'm going to the gym every single day. And I get my joy from that, because I can't truly believe that I'm like totally fucked. Sorry, I swear a lot. If I can do that, and if I built that up, and it was, sorry, I'm talking a lot about my stuff, but it might resonate with you. It's just, I think I built this image of me being weak, and this was building that up of being strong again. And did you get that at all? Like, coming from someone who exercised a lot, clearly had a lot of like masculine energy going on, and then being, I guess, in a position where you don't have that, did you start to have this feeling of being weak at all? And do you feel like you're building back that strength?
Yeah. And, we were talking beforehand, just a little bit about the, male and female and, less males sort of in this community. And, one of the things that, I think a lot of people have something that happens with their body through this. And I think, for men, what's much more difficult is when something like this causes a lot of weight loss.
Mm.
And I've had a lot of females say, "Oh, I wish I'd lost a bunch of weight like you." And I'm like, okay, sure. Right. And I can say the same to them. I'm like, I wish I had gained a bunch of weight like you, but that's really insensitive. And I think it's just this thinking that like, we have no feelings. We don't care how we look. We care. We care a lot. Like I do, I continue to feel weak because um, I've been slowly putting weight on the past, just the past couple of months. I've been at 165 pounds a lot of this year. 6'4", 165 pounds. I was 200 pounds, before this. So 200, 205. So like 35 to 45 pounds underweight. And like, when you're my build, I look like a skeleton sometimes, and it's hard. It's really hard. So yeah, I feel weak. I look weak myself. It's hard. I mean, I like wearing pullover sometimes just to cover up my arms. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if there's any consolation, you certainly don't look. You don't look. You look really thin on the camera right now. You don't. It doesn't seem like that. But yeah, that does. That's rough, man. And I completely. I've put on a lot more weight now through doing exercise, and I actually looked at a photo yesterday of me back in 2019, and I was doing this kind of like vegan raw diet where I just lost a shitload of weight, and it's tough. Do you feel like the exercise that you're doing now, what kind of exercise is it? Is it like more aerobic or?
So I'm doing like very light strengthening and just a lot of walking, a little bit of hiking. I like going out to the mountains, but I'm still having some challenges with like muscle recovery. I don't really know how else to describe it without going into a ton of detail, but when I exert, like if I were to lift any kind of weights, my muscles get, like as if you do 10 rows, my muscles behave as if I did 300.
Yeah.
And how sore they get. It's really, I've had that for a long time. It's kind of a, chronic inflammatory response syndrome kind of response in the muscles and the tissue. And so that's something that is still been kind of challenging for me with really pushing myself with exercise.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel so much, man. Like, there's so much I've got. I could talk about, and maybe we'll talk a little bit off camera, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about my experience. But in terms of like, if someone's listening to this right now, and again, I'll just commend you so much for like coming on at this stage in your journey when you've made that progression. So it's inspiring people, but you still have a way to go. So thank you. What would you say to someone like your version of yourself, like 3-4 years ago when you were back in Boston? Maybe you couldn't see a way out. Like, what would you say to that version of yourself? Because there's a version of that person like listening to this right now for sure.
Yeah, let me just take a second to think about that. Oh, I would say, find some people to look up to. I think having a mentor, whether it's someone who has what you have, or if they don't, then it's someone who is very compassionate and empathetic so that it doesn't matter. Having someone that you're looking up to, I think in life is big, but through something like this is really critical. And it being someone who is pure, authentic, good person doing the right thing. I think for a long time that was something that was lacking for me, and the people I was looking up to were not the right people. I think that can be overlooked, and the only people we're following are our doctors or our practitioners. And that's not to say that they're not good people to follow, but stepping outside of that a little bit, you want to find your sort of circle, your buddies. But I think that mentor, having someone to kind of guide you and kind of help you when you're falling off track. Because I know for me, like there's been periods where I don't even notice some of the things that I'm doing and the habits that I'm getting into. My doctor, I only have 30 minutes with them. My health coach isn't in this state that can help you kind of make sure you're staying in line with the things that you need to be doing to get to the life you want to get to. And I would also say, if you're struggling with that, whatever it is, pick out a few things that really matter to you that you're working towards. If you're a parent, it's your kids, right? But if you're not, you have to find that. And I think that for a period of time, I didn't have that. And I think that I was probably a little bit complacent. I could have used that. I could have used something really specific and tangible of like, this is why I'm willing to work through all this shit, all of it, emotionally, physically, and otherwise, because there is another side to this, and it's 100% worth it.
Awesome, man. I really want to have you back on in like a year or two's time, because I feel like we're very similar stages and stuff, and I feel like you've got such a strong healthy mindset now, and I can always tell when people are like commenting on posts or send me a DMs. I can always tell when someone's kind of on the right path and maybe when someone is quite a bit way off. And so it'd be really cool to have you back on in a year or two and talk about the progression you've made if you're up for that.
Yeah, no, I'd love to. This is great.
Awesome. If someone wants to reach out to you, ask you any questions about anything, is that all good? If so, how would they do that?
Yeah. So I'm on Instagram. Hopefully we can just link it here.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
Instagram, mind_body business.
Yeah.
That's going to probably be the best way to reach me. My personal email is timpeters.peters@gmail.com.
Awesome. And thank you so much, man. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story. I know people will get a lot from that, and I'm super excited to get you back on.
Yeah. No, thanks so much for having me. Thrilled to have this conversation.